And greetings, everybody. This is Lazarus with NBNN, and we are here live with Richard Garriott, aka Lord British, here on NBNN. How you doing today, Richard?
Doing great. Very excited to be with you both live on NBNN and for those live in the game, wonderful to be with you here in person as well.
And thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. Got a lot of great questions coming from the audience today. We got quite a few people out here just anticipating the interview. So let's go ahead and just jump right on in. Most of these questions, of course, have come from the community. We solicited most of our questions there because these, of course, are questions that they all are curious to hear. Let's get started a little bit about yourself. One of the questions we have is, what hobbies do you have outside creating video games? And how are your children and wife participating in your hobbies? You know, space travel, theater, automatons, magic, dress-up parties, so on and so on.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you gave a good part of the list right there, but if I had to sum it all up, I would say that this combination of exploration, which means, whether that's the deep sea or Antarctica or space, and then, and not just those, but I even consider automatons sort of an exploration, the exploration of science. Most of my collections are kind of science and engineering models, or these automatons are sort of that same way. Even the medieval armor and things I collect are sort of that exploration aspect. And then there's the virtual world creation, which manifests here where we all are together as sort of its main manifestation. But the haunted houses that I do fit that bill. The houses with secret passageways fit that same bill. The interactive parties that I throw fit that same bill. So it's really I just love to explore and sponge up the diversity of the wondrous universe in which we live. And I love to kind of find a way to creatively present that back to people in fanciful ways to participate in.
And I've heard about your haunted houses. I hear there's quite the event going on there. That your place is actually listed as an annual haunted house, is it?
Well, it used to be annual, and then it got so big it became every other year, and then it became so big it's like really about every 5 years now. But intermixed in those, I also do big themed events that are sort of like haunted houses, but not necessarily on October 31st. They could be any time of the year. And a big one we did recently was the End of the World, December 21st, 2012. We ended the world out of my property here in Austin. Maybe you've missed the end of the world somehow. But you also had asked in that original question, how does my family participate?
Correct. People were curious because you have such a difficult schedule, and most of us know you spend your time between Austin and New York most of the time.
Yeah, and my wife is a New Yorker, which is why we have New York is a part of our existence. But my wife, actually, interestingly, as an entrepreneur, is now in the space business too. She builds rockets with a company called Escape Dynamics. They're doing very unique rockets. Instead of carrying fuel and oxidizer, they beam the power to it to launch it into space. So it's a very new technology, but that could reduce radically the cost of access of space.
Interesting.
And so the same kind of, my wife's travel interests are really cultural, or mine might be. I'm just as excited by extremophile bacteria in a scummy pond.
Sorry about that.
I want to go visit, people in unusual cultures.
I got a new follower there, and I didn't think about that audio.
No problem.
Okay. Anyway, let's move on here. That's really great, interesting stuff about the new propulsion systems that they're working on. That we could probably go on for hours about, and your love of space travel. One of the questions we have is, how is working on a crowd-funded game different from working on a game backed by a major publisher?
Well, the differences are vast. A lot of the code writing is of course very similar, and the art generation, of course, is similar. But as I look back through the Ultimas, the ones that were my favorites were ones like Ultima 4, Ultima 7, and Ultima Online. And what's interesting about all three of those examples is those were games where I was in complete disagreement with my publisher, even when my publisher was my brother, as to what the game could or should be like. And I stood my ground and I made it the way I believed that it should be. And when I felt the publisher was not even, necessarily a gamer or a game player, or just really didn't feel understood it well enough to overrule me. On the other hand, the games that I think that had the most troubled launches were Ultima 8 and Tabula Rasa. And even though I think that the core of those were very good games, both those games we shipped too early, and both those games had rocky starts to them, largely based upon my relationship with my publisher. And so and it's not that they forced me to do anything, it's just that I listened to a publisher versus listening to either myself or gamers. So one of the first great things about being, working for all of you is you all are not just gamers, you're specifically the actual clients. And so the feedback we get from you is heartfelt, well-meant, and to guide us to what you want. Secondarily, it's almost always exactly what also I want. We're looking for the same thing.
Now,
and so that part of the experience is really amazing.
Now, it's been said, out in the net and stuff, that this game is actually targeted at specific people, and the community that we're building here is the most important part of it, because you're building it for the community of people. You're not actually reaching out to the big masses. You're building it for a specific mindset, a type of person who enjoys the Lord British features and the nuances that are put into a lot of your games. Any comment on that? Is that a pretty fair statement?
I agree with that completely.
Yes.
Now, I'm also a believer that I put role-playing games into sort of two categories: the Ultima type and the EverQuest or World of Warcraft type. And the way I would differentiate those is, if you look at the amazingly good games of World of Warcraft and EverQuest, in those games, everyone is first and foremost a combatant who might also be able to do some crafting or other activities. If you look at an Ultima, the world is rich enough and diverse enough that those other activities are deep enough to where you don't ever have to get involved in combat if you don't want. You can live a full, rich life.
Absolutely.
That has nothing to do with being a combatant. And while most people probably still will be combatants, I predict more than 50% of people will at least at some time be involved in combat. But the point is, you can spend a lot of time, and even potentially all of your time, doing things that are not combat.
I have personally figured that I could never leave Owl's Head and have a successful business and never have to leave the city. So I wish. And that was one of the most fantastic things I found about this game, is that once I explored the nuances, was the fact that if I wanted to just be a citizen and a crafter and never go outside, I could hunt the deer that are in the forest around the area and we work the hides and never have to leave, which was just a great, great, great thing.
Exactly right. And I believe very strongly in that model. And so, I hope we get a virtue story in that is, competitive with the Ultima 4 through 7 stories. I believe we are going to get a level of physical interaction with the world that is, competitive with Ultima 7's level of, touch things and they move in response to your interaction. And I believe that we'll get a circular crafting and living set of skills that is better than Ultima Online. And so, I hope this is sort of the best of all the things we've done in the past. And the only really way we're pulling it off is, one, with great feedback from all of you. We got another big leg up from Unity, as opposed to having to start writing engines from scratch. It's the first time we've been able to really skip the first year or two of development of just getting the foundational polygons on screen, and that's letting us do in 2 or 3 years here what usually takes us 3 to 5 years. And I'm personally, we're sort of turning the corner now from building systems into the finished content creation, which to me is a very exciting time, because we can begin on the team. We can begin to see the lights at the end of the tunnel.
Good, good. Now I'm going to jump to something I touched on, coming from again, the community, that we have seen a few of the Lord British features that will help set the game apart, like public chess, writable books, the solar systems. Are there any other special Lord British features on the way we can look forward to? Things like starving to death,
Oh yeah,
and little interesting things that have known to happen in the Lord British games.
absolutely, of course. And so some of the, to me, some of the near-term interesting ones is weather is coming online this release, and so you'll now see periodic rains. Eventually, you'll see snow and wind and other kinds of storminess. But rain will be the
And
first one, and that's
seasons,
just
basically.
bringing the system online. And by the way, you already have seen, up at the top of the screen, you can see that it says Wednesday, September 10th in the summer of the year 468.
Correct.
And so springs will be wetter, summers will be sunnier, falls will be windier, and winters will be snowier. And that's just as a statistical truth. But rain will be the first one you'll see start showing up here in a couple of days.
Oh, very good, very good. Now,
But in addition, you also mentioned starving to death.
yes, that was one that was possible.
Yeah, and the so food, cooking, and food are finally. We have a new employee who, not for the release that's coming up tomorrow, of course, but for the next release, he's still going to be finishing out the crafting of weapons and armor first, but the one right on the back of that will be cooking and eating food. As some of you have heard me say before, protein in the ingredients will help your health recovery. Carbs in the foods that you eat will help with your focus recovery. Fats in your foods will help with your endurance. And none of those, by the way, will kill you if you run low. But the one that we're still debating on exactly how will be water. And so water is one of those where if you really go without water for the rest of your life, it might actually kill you versus just make you not heal well.
Interesting little piece of information for the good folks out there. Now, on that same topic of Lord British features, what's that?
Cheering.
Oh,
Brian Vesper was down there cheering,
yeah.
so I'm saying.
Well, yeah, Breyer is quite the entrepreneur here, as you can see by his little cafe. And one of his, he had a chat with you the other day, and he was excited by some of the information you gave him about the foods having different buffs and effects on people, and being part of literally the economy, which is absolutely wonderful. It's just again one of those Lord British features. Now, two hot topics, of course, and again on a Lord British feature. The question is, can you please comment on the fishing system plan for Shrouded Avatar? So little is so known so far. Some details. Will we have to bait a hook? Will we have to cast our line? Will we be able to fish up trash, messaging bottles, treasure maps, etc., etc.? The masses want to know about fishing. And of course, Winfield is a very big proponent, but this did not come from Winfield, I assure you.
Well, the short answer to that question is yes. So all those things you mentioned, can and should be and will be a part of it. But let me tell you how it's going to unfold. I'm even making some notes here to make sure we don't forget. I'd almost forgotten about the fact that you used to be able to get maps, and so I'm just going to make some a note to self to make sure that was on the list. But the implementation that is written up on fishing. Now, none of this has been implemented, so hypothetically it could deviate a little bit. But right now, the blacksmith makes fishing hooks out of wire that they pulled through, a wire making block. The poles are made by a carpenter. The string is made out of cat gut and other things that is made by a tanner. There's bait that comes out of cutting up meats. There's some scraps that come out that turn into bait. You can also get worms out of dirt, primarily after it rains.
I got a question on that.
Rains. And then when you fish, we intend to put schools of fish in the water. So we have three types of fish. I can't remember. It's like salmon and trout and something else. When you grab one of those fish out of the water, in reality, it's just a fish. But at that moment, we're going to give it a weight. So you can say, I found a 3-pound salmon or a 5-pound salmon. And that means eventually you can have leaderboards for fishing. And if you want to catch salmon, you should be looking in the water to see if there are salmon nearby. And the closer to salmon pools you are, the higher the probability there'll be salmon. And that salmon spawner might spawn seasonally. And so, in the spring or whenever salmon run, you'll see salmon in the water and you have a higher chance of catching salmon. And so month to month, people might choose which fishing tournaments to have based upon which fish are in season, or even trying to catch fish when it's out of season, because it still might be possible. But then, of course, we'll add those critical successes and critical failures where you might catch, boots and maps and, other odds and ends as well.
And I think the community is just going to love you for that, because the consensus in the community was, don't bug them on fishing, let them work their magic. And I think you've just answered a lot of people's questions about that philosophy here in the game, which is, again, I can see commentary here in the chat room, and people are just like, okay. Now, a question we had, and we actually nixed it off the list, was, will there be worm farming? And it was just asked again in here. And when you mentioned worms, I says to myself, I should have left that question in, so here it is.
Yeah. Well, and so the answer is yes. So it's not going to be terribly sophisticated worm farming. We're not going to make you do composting and, doing other things that would help out. But if you till soil in preparation for farming it, but don't plant seeds in it, that farm, that soil will be ripe for worms upon rains. And so you'll be able to, there will be times when worms will be available specifically.
And of course, that'll deal with the weather system and all that stuff. Okay.
You got it.
Great stuff. Okay. Let's see. Where are we? Where do we want to follow on this? I know now we have a little time crunch, so we can't get all these questions in depth. So I'm looking for a big question.
Right. I can say while you're looking, people may notice that I'm clicking around on everyone. Like, for example, John McKenzie, I just added as a friend right this moment. And I do that with everybody I meet in game, by the way, is I try to make all of you my friend. And please feel free to friend me back. And the reason I like to do that is it means, one, I can see when you're in game and I can teleport to you, but it also means you can see me when I'm in game, so you can message me or say, hey, I've got something I'd like to talk to you about, or a bug to show you. And also just so you'll know that I'm really playing this game with you. And so so there's no doubt that at least one of the key developers of this game is literally here as commonly as possible playing alongside you. So please feel free to friend me, and don't be surprised when I'm adding you as a friend.
Yeah, we shout that out here all the time. When I met you in Soul Town during the last wipe, and you were friending everybody, you told us to shout it out, and I tell everybody I meet. Also, for those of you who play on Steam, it's a Steam achievement to add Lord British to your friends list, as well as Darkstar. So go ahead and do that, just if you want Steam achievements for it. That is another reason to friend Lord British in-game. Quick question. What is the name of the planet that Novia is on?
Well, so Novia is a large island continent within New Britannia. And so, but I've actually never specified if New Britannia is literally the name of the planet, or is only the collection of continents that will make up these first 5 episodes. And so, to be honest, I haven't really decided if that's even an important differentiation to make yet. But I think for all practical purposes, you should call it New Britannia. But there is a hypothetical chance that after episode 5, I might decide we need something on the other side of the world, some new continent to expand into, in which case we might need a name for the planet beyond New Britannia.
Well, we know the solar system and those planetary bodies out there have names. And I don't think those have all actually been publicly released as of yet.
No, they haven't, because the names aren't really settled. I have kind of pet names for them that have to do with the 8 virtues. But
right.
I haven't even decided really whether I'm going to name them out of the 8 virtues or the 8 vices, and then what permutation I'll put to that, or what whether I'll do Latin root exactly, or name it specifically in English after the virtue, or what. So I know what the theme of each planet is. I just don't have the name settled.
Alrighty, so that answers a lot of things. And then, of course, with, of course, the heavenly bodies and your known affection for space travel, do you plan for space travel to ever make its way into the game? With examples being maybe from entering a moon gate and traveling to another realm or another plane of existence, or of course a throwback to a very early Ultima where you actually boarded a space shuttle and flew into space. Um, any plans for that in the future?
Well, I think that to board a spacecraft and fly into space is the probability of that is fairly low. However, to visit one of the moons is actually fairly high. And I won't describe exactly how, because the how is not subtle, and it's not meaning that it'll be in this episode 1 of this game. It's actually something else. So I think there is, if you look at travel, right now everybody's walking everywhere, or maybe using their coconut horses.
Yeah.
There's currently ship teleporters or lunar rift teleporters. But over time, we do plan on there being mounts, horses, etc. Over time, we do plan on you being able to take ships across. Over time, we plan to even have airships. Over time, there will be a way to, we think, I would predict today at least, that there would be a way to visit, one of the, potentially at least one of the moons. But whether you'd literally be able to board a ship and go into space, I think that's unlikely.
I had figured as much as well, but the question was there that people had visited and traveled into space in previous Ultima games, and the thought was there.
Well, and of course, to explain that, the earliest Ultimas, don't forget, I was 19 years old when I started writing this series.
Absolutely.
And not only was I only 19, I had no previous examples. There were no other role-playing games before me. They're, on the computer. There were very few computer games of any kind before this. So I was sort of making it up as I went along, and I was being inspired by not just Lord of the Rings and Chronicles of Narnia and things of that nature, but I was just as inspired by Time Bandits, which is where cloth maps came from, and traveling to the planets and going forward back in time. I was just as inspired by Star Wars, which was coming out at that time. And so that's where land speeders and lightsabers and other stuff came from.
All that stuff came from, right?
All that stuff came from. And it was only after kind of making the hodgepodge game for a few games that I finally said, look, not only is it just fictionally impure, but it's also really hard to say I'm going to do 3D dungeons, 2D outdoors, a separate scale 2D towns, then stars going by you in 3D with TIE fighters or another kind of crap, in space. And, you're writing a whole bunch of game engines all in one game. And that means the user interface had to be different for each of those environments. And it was really just making the work that I was taking on to be much greater than if I just focused on one engine and build the game in that engine. And at that time, I really felt the tile graphics that I was working on was sort of the sweet spot of where I thought I was getting the best gameplay, and so that's why I focused on that.
All right. Now, going into the gameplay and all that stuff, it's my understanding that the game started out as a steampunk MMO. What was the motivation for going back to a medieval fantasy genre as an MMORPG?
Yeah, so what's interesting about that is that you kind of go full circle in your thinking of early Ultimas were everything from medieval to super futuristic. Then they shrunk down to become medieval. Then after Origin, the one thing I didn't want to do for a while was medieval, which is why Tabula Rasa went very much the other way. And then when we started thinking about Shroud of the Avatar, we sat back and said, do we want to do strictly speaking medieval, or do you want to do some reinterpretation? And even though I wouldn't have used specifically the word steampunk, it was clearly the original sketches that we were putting together clearly had that sort of vibe to it. But as we started showing people that vibe of that early art, we actually got quite a bit of resistance from the community. And so we sat back and said, okay, maybe we ought to for sure start with something that the community feels comfortable with, and then sort of explore outwards from there. And so that's when we put that kind of more steampunky kind of stuff on the shelf. We never threw it away. It's actually still, a lot of it's in the game now actually already. But we sort of put that foundation on the shelf, went back to a traditional foundation, but then began to introduce elements and kind of measure people's comfort and see which way we wanted to kind of push it. And so the radio, which many of you are probably listening to this on here at the front of the stage,
there's one sitting right in front of us on stage there. Yeah,
that's a perfect example. And the moon tower, behind us is a perfect example. And we have some weapons coming online that have been overdue. A gas gun and a little Tesla gun, that the kobolds made that also kind of go in that vector a little bit. And some of the so I would actually, instead of calling it steampunk, I would really call it clock punk. Is more of the interpretation I like to push, even though some of it does have electricity, like the radio and the moon towers. But fundamentally, I like the kobolds being the representatives of kind of clock punk structure that is sort of bleeding into the world. But we'll evolve it along with you all and find what people think is exciting versus distracting.
And we got some comments out there that say we need more steampunk. And of course, Lump Dizzle goes, "I want a Tesla gun." You're gonna have people going, "Oh, what is possible?" Now, one of the things I really love here is that just about anything you guys can dream up, or the community can dream up, is essentially possible in some way, shape, or form. And down the line, after release 1 is in the bag, in the box, and out there, you guys are going to be able to play a little bit more creatively with your monthly releases. Is that a fair statement to say? I mean, not just play, but continue. I know you're going to continue to add and expand on things. But will that allow you to be more creative with it, and taking feedback from the community is probably the question.
Yeah, no, unquestionably that is correct. And while right now we're in this massive, we're mostly through systems. We're pushing hard now on content. Once we get to release 1.0, as you were mentioning, both from a coding standpoint and from a content creation standpoint, we should be far freer to then sit down and go, and we'll have this backlog of stretch goals we still ultimately want to push on. So whether it's mounts or ships or whatever the things that we've all talked about a few times before, but we've been out of episode 1, those will come online as things we'll be pushing on. But you're absolutely correct. We're also sit back and go, okay, where are people having a good time? Are people really enjoying hanging out at places like this and having conversations? And would they prefer to have gambling and table games they could play, or would you all prefer to have more forms of hunting and fishing in some way? And so we'll actually be responding exactly to where you guys kind of push and prod us to add new features and new depth in that will ultimately become kind of the core of episode 2.
Now, we had a question here, of course, pertaining to the games inside the games. Of course, I am the proud owner of a teleprompter, and I can't wait for it to come online to be able to play the original D&D #1 inside Shrouded Avatar. I just love the concept. I mean, I'm eating it up. But one of the questions we have out here was, what was your favorite or most proud of mini games in the older Ultimas, and which do you hope to see in Soda?
Oh, well, so the definition of something called mini game is interesting in that you could call fishing, as it once was, a mini game, but it's really a skill. But if you're talking about things that kind of manifested out of skills, fishing would have been it in the past. And the reason why that was a particularly exciting one was because of how it evolved. I mean, originally it was literally just 50-50 chance to catch a fish. But it evolved over time into being a much deeper simulation because it was so popular despite its original utter simplicity. And it was funny to see people, go, "Oh, the fishing's better over here than it is over there," when they were so convinced of it that we would go back and look at the code, to see, whether that was
whether it was actually something in there that you guys didn't intend or missed somewhere along the line. Exactly. Okay, gotcha.
Exactly right. And so eventually we of course figured that wasn't the case. But anyway, that was an exciting one. But also the ones I liked that were best, that were more correctly described as mini games, would be places where we would give the pieces to the game, but then the community would make of it what they would. Like the giant chess sets would fit that now, or Gust Ball would sort of fit that now. And eventually, if we figured a way to give you dice or cards or things that you can, or checkers that you could move around in a more practical way, those would fit those.
Now, the chess set is a good point that you make, and there's been some moaning and groaning because the chess set doesn't really function to where two players can just walk up to somebody's chess set on their lawn and play chess, only because they're actual items on somebody else's lot.
True, but of course you could open. First of all, we'll solve that in however ways we need to. But a hacky way to solve it now.
Yeah, we figured that out. Is to be there with the owner and we get permissions. I've played several games in the game, and again, love the concept. Just one of them little things that you look at and go, that's something that's on the back burner until we get everything else in, of course.
Right.
Let's see. So we got that out of there. Another hot topic. Let's go on to, we hit into the seasons, the weather and stuff. And one of the questions we have out there is, as far as New Britannia holidays and rituals are concerned, you've asked the community to brainstorm for ideas for rituals specific to the New Britannia holidays and traditions. Question is, have you embraced any plans to pursue any ideas that have been proposed, or all of the holidays going to be up to the community? And then, of course, what about our earthly traditional holidays with all that thought and put together?
Yeah, so we're going to do both, just because I think that's what players would want. Clearly, when you come up with Earth holidays, there's a reason to echo those because they're the actual holidays that we're celebrating in the real world, and so it's nice for a community to get together and kind of do something similar in game and talk about that. So, in the real winter season, we'll give away more, snowballs. In the real in the United States, July 4th, which also happens to be my birthday, we'll give away more fireworks. And, maybe the same thing with Real Earth, New Year's. But of course, pardon me. One game year is 2 Earth weeks. And, that's probably, frankly, too frequent to have a New Year's celebration. Midnight every 2 weeks, it's suddenly,
New Year's, yeah. Well, around here, they love their parties, so don't put that past the community.
That's a good point. Could be. But the way we're going to tend to do those is based upon planetary conjunctions. And by the way, we figured out the math for planetary conjunctions to make sure that they would have a complex rhythm that all lined up again with on a long period, such as a period of about an Earth year. But we haven't even determined ourselves. We've never watched them close enough to see which multiple alignments happen on which actual dates. But it will happen on a cycle. And so we will find those. We'll discover them together. If you think about the real holidays that we have on the real world, it was discovering how long a month was, discovering how long a lunar year was. And we're going to discover those things together. We don't actually know. And so we'll find a rhythm that fits real Britannian time, and therefore we'll be able to share that.
Yeah. Now, I get a lot of commentary while I'm in game playing, and people go, well, how do I figure this? How do I figure that? What's the stats on this? What's the stats on that? And my typical answer is, that's up to you to figure out. It's an ever-evolving thing right now, of course, first. And my belief is that you guys aren't just going to put that information out there on a plate so-and-so knows that X shield always gets this bonus and blah, blah, blah. That's something that you're going to have to go out as a person in the game, as an avatar, and work that out and see how that works. Is that fair enough to say that?
Yes, but by the way, I have to tell you, the dev team who, I also have those questions, right? I'm not the guy putting in the data in the combat system. So I have that question myself. The best place for me to get the question answered as a developer is not by asking the other developers who are often working on something else and don't have it at the top of their mind. The best place to get the answer to these questions is the Soda Wiki run by the community. And
Absolutely.
We as a development team use that as our source because you all, different individuals within the community are actually better at figuring out what is actually working in the game and how than we are ourselves. And so it's more consistent, it's more accurate and up to date, even than trying to suss through, the work we're doing in real time.
And that's good information. So for those of you folks who are adding to that, just keep that in mind. Our developers out there are actually taking that as feedback, and that's a great thing. Another thing that we'd like to touch on, of course, is this is probably the first time in MMORPG gaming history where this is being done like this. And people go, there are various conversations on the negative reviews on Steam because the Steam people aren't used to such a pre-release. But nobody's ever seen this done on any kind of scale, let alone on the grand scale that we're doing here. And that is absolutely great. What is it like working in that environment? And again, breaking the boundaries and breaking the molds of how it's done.
Well, what's interesting about that is, we as a development team, when we first started the Kickstarter, you really have no idea, is it going to succeed or fail? I mean, you hope so, but you don't really know. And then once you now have a big chunk of other people's money, psychologically, it's actually very different than having a publisher's money or my brother's money or my friend's money, because anybody that's an investor in the company is an accredited investor. These are people that by law and habit understand they're making a very risky bet. They're doing it as an investment. They're going to make 10 other investments, and they hope one of them pays off. And so spending their money, you feel like it's a business relationship. Once we have your money, it's now a personal relationship. You have entrusted us to not waste your money, to spend the money wisely, and to specifically produce something that you bet on because you have an assumption as to what it is we're actually going to create and that we want to fulfill. And so we look at that and go, it's an amazing amount of responsibility. This team joyfully looks at this responsibility in a way that I've never, it feels completely different than any other game development. No one here wants to waste a penny. I mean, we live in the most Spartan conditions. We thought, the worst thing we could ever do would be to waste some of your money on something frivolous and therefore fail to serve you, the person who trusted us, with your money. And so that's the first kind of interesting part. The second interesting part is how much we crave this interaction in the game to hear, are we successfully creating you what you wanted us? You hired us. You're our boss. We live or die not only literally by whether you're happy or not, but I'm redundantly saying,
yeah, and a lot of people don't get that.
If we're not going the way, if we're not steering in the direction you like, you guys quit coming, and that's the end.
I do a lot of reading, and I do a lot, and again, I consider myself a personal investor. I've taken the risk looking at what I see coming of age here, and I said to myself, this is something that one way or the other is I got to do it. I believe that it can be done. I know the technology is there where things weren't available for you guys to be able to create this kind of stuff in the past. And given the right amount of time and patience, and I believe this whole community by and large has the same thing, they're not pressing you for a hard date. They're not sitting there like a publisher would be going, we have to. You guys are going, we want this product to be exactly what you all asked for, and we want to deliver it in exactly the way that you have laid it out, and we're not going to release it 1 second sooner. And the community is 110% behind you guys on that. And we thank you guys for the hard work and stuff you put in there.
And we can have the same belief also. And and also what's interesting is the game's live now. We all live together in this world now. And so in that way, this feels more like post-launch of a traditional game than it used to. And so we are, anyway, I think that's a nice position to be in. It takes the pressure off calling it shipped. Because the one thing we don't want to do is wipes. We know that starting over everybody, it's okay to start over now and then when you haven't made that big an investment. But the bigger your investment becomes, the more time you spent, beautifying your house and leveling up your character and, building a presence and organizing stuff like we see here around us. The more of that you've done, the more painful it is to start over. And so we're very cognizant of that. But but that's sort of the thing we're trying to manage is we don't want to do that unless it's just really has to be done. And so I think we were just counting today. We may only have 2 more wipes before the end. So we're trying to keep it as minimal as possible.
Alrighty. Now we are on a little bit of a time crunch here, so let's go ahead and get a couple of hopefully simple and easy questions out of the way.
Yep.
NPC servants and pets, the departed pledge rewards. What is their eventual purpose, and what will they do?
Well, so there are some NPCs, servants and pets, and eventually livestock, sheep and cows. Should eventually be available to y'all. A lot of those are going to just be color for you. Just like you have a table and a chair, you can have a cat, roaming around in your house. And so it's kind of the simplest piece of an answer. However, we also know that what I would describe as hirelings are also an important part of having a well-operating home or business in the game. And the first part of those is just now starting to go in. There's a vendor standing over next to us, or you can't yet name your vendor, so his name is Vendor over there. But ultimately, you should be able to rename your vendors and your pets and other things too, so that they can be a little bit more distinctive.
Now, will that include changing clothing?
Eventually, of course, it should.
Right.
Eventually, if you have a hireling fighter, eventually, you should be able to, put weapons in his hand, put armor on his back, and do whatever you want. That's fairly far away.
Down the line, right? But these are questions that just people are curious about.
But ultimately, that has to be where it's headed. Now, the part that would be our dream as a team, but it's not clear we'll get there anytime soon, would be able to even populate conversation of NPCs, where you can say, here's my greeter, my butler, who's at the front door, who I want to, have this either palette of or specific things they say. And now I'm completely speculating, but I can imagine a Mad Libs fill-in sheet. If you remember the old Mad Libs things, put noun here, verb here, and ta-da, here's a story. I can imagine a butler that did that sort of thing. Because we already do, NPCs already remember things. You can imagine interviewing your butler.
We know when you tell an NPC your name, they forever remember your name.
And by the way, they're also well aware of the fact of whether you're lying to them or not. So beware, all you liars. If the Oracle is watching, and knows when and Santa Claus is probably watching. And knows that you've been naughty.
And killing them watchers can be detrimental to your virtues out there.
Or at the very least, piss off the Oracle.
And that's another interesting question we've had, is the virtues you originally conceived for Ultima are also making an appearance here in Shroud. Do these virtues extend to your personal life?
Oh, what's interesting is, so when I made up the virtues, which is, it's fiction. That being said, I went through a very careful process to create them. I sat back and said, okay, if I'm going to do a game about virtue, what am I going to talk about? Am I going to talk about the 10 Commandments? And I went, no, I actually don't think that's the right basis either for a game or the pattern I thought was appropriate to push in a game. And then said, well, am I going to try the 7 deadly sins, avoiding the 7 deadly sins? And I went, no, that's good for scary movies, but really, even if trying to use the opposite of those didn't really fit. And then I said, well, let me go look at Greek philosophy and utopian philosophy. And those were dated, shall I say. They were very interesting reads, but still didn't feel like the most modernly contemporary. Somebody's noticing that I love it when I take a pen, come down for note taking. You're right. That was a note about butlers and interviewing for Mad Libs.
Yep.
but when I sat down and came up with Truth, Love, and Courage, I actually went through a very hard process to do a ton of research. I still actually have my virtue research library. The top shelf over here is my virtue study. By the way, behind me here is the original Apple II that I wrote the Calibet.
I was noticing that when you first sat down. Now, you had that at the convention while you were running that side by side while you guys out at E3 just recently.
I did. You know, I was running a Calibet at the convention, and this is now running Ultima 1. And so I have a black and white monitor over here for when I run a Calibet, and I have the color monitor here now.
Absolutely cool. Absolutely cool.
But to finish the virtue thing, though, you know, my shelf here, you know, when I sat down, I just started pouring through philosophy books to go, what are the basic concepts that, you know, that motivate behavior, good, bad, or otherwise? And as I sorted, you know, nouns on the wall of different virtues, I kind of arranged them in things where, you know, like love and compassion are clearly related, you know, and courage and valor are clearly related. And I kind of just began to organize and reorganize things on the wall until I came to 3, Truth, Love, and Courage. We went, you know what, that's almost everything else I can see as a combination of, or lack, you know, of the positive or negative attributes of those. Almost everything else I could kind of, at least in my rationalize in my mind, that they were derived from those. And so that's where I came up with Truth, Love, and Courage. Even though it's fiction, I actually believe it's pretty darn good fiction in a reality sense. And the only thing I would add to that is this something some of you have heard me mention before called, I've often called it ethical hedonism. It's sort of one of my personal philosophies of life that I even have tattooed on my body in addition to the virtues. Is sort of the one level up, doing the, you know, what is the purpose of life? And I think the purpose of life is happiness, and or at least your goal in life to be happy. And if you don't pursue happiness, you might succeed at not being happy. And that ethics or virtues is the rational limitation you should put on those, and that goes back into the 8 virtues: truth, love, and courage, and etc. And so I think that. Yeah, the virtues are fiction, but one I sort of believe also.
Alrighty. Hard question, not hard question, but a burning question on people's minds. Will multi-tiered currency make it into the game?
Oh, good question. Episode 1, I actually think maybe not. You know, we're very close to having it, so maybe it might. But at least on the team so far, I haven't seen anybody kind of pushing for it any strong way, and so it's not clear that we will put in multi-level currency like gold and silver and copper, which even in my own Castleton medieval village, we have printed or minted physical gold, silver, copper, and bronze. We actually have 4 currencies, but you know, we'll see. Hard to say.
Alrighty. Now, we had touched on, you know, the episodes to come later, and these couple questions are going to be along the same lines here. As we approach release and looking at the greater picture, I wonder whether there is a plan in place to fund the subsequent episodes to come. Will we be seeing the introduction of pledge levels again for episodes 2, 3, and beyond? My understanding is that these new episodes would take considerable amount of time, as they will be introducing new systems such as boating, riding, so on and so forth. Is there any such plans in place just yet that you could comment on publicly?
Yeah, you know, there's an idea of a plan. There's not really a plan because we don't really know what's going to happen when we launch this game. You know,
okay.
if this game, you know, if even the people that have already signed up to be New Britannians but have not yet paid, if we even reach those people, we may not need another Kickstarter or pledge levels.
Gotcha.
But if we need to pre-fund it instead of use the money out of the sales of the current game, we will do that if need be. But again, we also don't know how big the live team is going to need to be just to sustain this game. So it's hard to measure. If we're wildly successful, that of course means more money will come in on post-launch. But it also might mean we might need to staff up a lot more servers or a lot more people just to support it. And so it's really hard to get a read on
Too
what's the
hard to go
financial
ahead
trend
and
going to be like.
I got you. Now, another question related to that, of course, is can a player buy and reserve a town for a later release? I mean, will player-owned towns for episode 2 be available? If somebody wants to buy one now instead of getting it in release 1, reserve it for release 2.
Well, that comes up especially interestingly because player-owned towns have been so popular that we, as you know, we put a line in the sand and said any new ones can't show up as an icon on the surface of Novia,
Correct.
and instead they're nested. And the reason is there's just a limited amount of physical space on the surface of Novia, and we didn't want to have a carpet of player-owned towns. We wanted to stop at a density that felt comfortable as you walk around. And so we could predict that would happen with episode 2 also. And so it's an interesting thought. Hadn't discussed it with the team, but I like that as a suggestion, just because we could probably predict that we'd have that same issue with episode 2.
Now, I mean, it's my understanding, or at least the way I see it happening, is that as the new episodes come out, new continents and content are going to become available. Is that correct?
So the way that content will be unfolded, so certain features will be available globally, but the physical content will be queued up for episode 2. Now, just like everybody right now is in playing episode 1, even though episode 1 is not launched, I'm sure we'll give beta access to that content for those who have rights to play in episode 2 content. So that means, for example, Barons and Higher, they're part of their pledge results was they get episode 2, 3, 4, and 5 as part of the deal.
Right.
And so as soon as we're even in alpha or pre-alpha of episode 2 lands, they should be able to go walk across that border. People that only came in at the $45 adventurer pledge level would need to pay another $45 to get the adventurer level on that second continent.
Right.
To cross over to the second continent, even in alpha version.
Gotcha. But there are going to be new continents, was really the question.
Absolutely.
Right, then, okay.
In fact, sort of a way that I've kind of described that to people is, in fact, I even have a diagram. I was talking about this earlier today. Imagine Novia is the center square of a tic-tac-toe board, and then episode 2 makes a wider rectangle. Episode 3 goes back to more of a taller square. Episode 4 gives you this whole bottom 2/3. And then finally with episode 5, we're back to this full map. And so that's sort of the way we intend to expand it. So it's always rectangular, so we can each time produce a cloth map.
Gotcha.
But it gets a little bigger each time.
All right. Now we're running short here on time, so 2 quick questions, and these shouldn't be too hard. Are there any plans to implement a function that allows one to lock down permanently an item or container, like the stage we're sitting on? For instance, sometimes when you go to move something like the chair we're sitting on, you accidentally grab the stage. Is there any plans to be able to lock down that item on, onto the lot where?
We could easily do that. It's a pretty simple UI fix. I've not heard that requested previously till now. Maybe the request has been made on the forums or other things, but the people watching that would be in the room next to me. So I'd have to go next door to ask, but it sounds like a pretty simple one. If that's something you guys need, we'll turn it on.
Okay, and then burning question. Will we eventually be able to ride dragons in game and use them and engage in aerial combat? And the comment behind that is, those airship make mighty fine targets once they become operational.
So aerial combat is further away than ship combat, but is of the same ilk. And so, and I saw somebody much earlier also saying, jousting, we want jousting. These go up in levels of complexity. Once we have mounts, combat from mounts will be relatively some modest step up from that. Now, once we have ships moving, relevant ship-to-ship combat could be quite complex if we wanted to do grappling and cannons and boarding and all that kind of stuff. So it depends on how deep do we choose to go. How deep would you all like us to go? And we think deeper is cooler too, but it will then push further off, airship combat or movement or whatever else. So we're just gonna plow through it. We're gonna start in with mounts, and then combat with mounts, and then ships, and then combat with ships, and then movement of airships, and then maybe if you guys still want, well, combat in the air and bird mounts and whatever else. We have no problem doing any of this, but it just all has to be queued up and see which release it fits into.
And of course, just given the proper amount of time to be patient with it and let you guys work on the systems and continue doing what it is you all do there.
Exactly.
Yeah, and again, I gotta say I'm loving everything I see here, as well as the community out there. And for all of you folks out there in the community, if you can.
Yep. And I just got my note of, yes, I have my board call in 5 minutes. So,
yes, that's why I'm getting ready to tie it up now, because I'm going to spend a minute with you right afterwards here as well. And I'm just asking everybody to give Lord British a hand here in game.
Thank you very much. Sure appreciate it.
And we're going to thank you for your time here today, Richard. Just hang on the line with me here as we sign off. We do thank you for taking the time out of your schedule today to be here on NBNN. And we're looking forward to all the great stuff that we've talked about, as well as more. Remember, you folks out there, that don't hesitate. $45 account, $5,000 account, don't matter. Send that idea, drop that note, and email the forums. You see Lord British, Darkstar Online, PM them, whisper to them, give them the feedback. That's what we are here for.
Absolutely, and I really do. As those of you who see me in the game a lot, I not only love to hang out and chat just like this, but I love going on adventures with you. So if you're going out on a hunting or gathering party, that's actually so useful. First of all, it's fun. And it also is the kind of feedback we need to see how the game is being used and played, and whether it's balanced or terrible, and that sort of thing. So
I can personally say it's an adventure, because I've been on several of those hunts with you, and it's always a pleasure to have you come on in and say, hey, can I come join along with you? And
exactly.
Of course, anybody ever gets the chance, absolutely, take Lord British on a run with you. You won't regret it. Okay, right. Just again, 1 minute. I'll be back with you in a moment. This is Laz signing off on NBNN. You just watched us here live with Richard Garriott, a.k.a. Lord British, here on Shroud Avatar. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Join us again for more news, information, interviews, game shows, sporting events, and more here on NBNN. Thanks for watching, everybody.